Welcome to The State of Mind, the podcast that brings together consciousness, meditation, psychology, psychedelics, and so much more in pursuit of this mystery we call life. This is Julian Royce. I hope you all enjoyed our new intro. Background music is the track Hummingbird from the artist Stephen Newman, who's also been featured on this podcast. A few quick announcements here. If you've been subscribed to this podcast in the past, you may need to resubscribe because I've recently changed our hosting service to anchor.fm. So thanks to them. And it was kind of amazing to see the news this weekend. I'm recording this July 26th. Where there is just massive protest in Portland and Seattle and Kentucky. So the protest movement has continued, and that is at least in part the subject of today's conversation. I'm speaking for the second time with Edward Galan, and I'm really glad to have him back on the podcast. I value his perspectives. He is an African American from the Dominican Republic who moved to the United States when he was a child. And so he has some unique perspectives on things here, I think, and he's been really putting his voice out there more and more and expressing those. My first conversation with Edward, I believe episode number 50, we had some real technical difficulties, and that resulted in parts of our conversation coming out like garbled computer speak. So I really do apologize for that. And I decided to publish that episode anyway because it's really challenging to coordinate these and schedule them, and because I thought it was an important, timely conversation, and I felt that it was mostly quite listenable despite those computer-garbled moments. In the future, generally speaking, I'm going to not publish episodes unless the audio is at high quality. And luckily today, round 2 with Edward, we had no technical difficulties, and the audio came out quite well. There's also going to be a video for this on YouTube. And in our conversation, we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and these protests. And we talk about the lack of leadership and the failure in some of the messaging that has come out of them. We talk about the downsides of political correctness. We talk about some of the self-serving and alarmist rhetoric of the intellectual dark web, as well as, some of our appreciation for the people who make that up. And Edward shares some observations about white progressive activists and some of the shadow dynamics he's observed at play in disavowing things like leadership and hierarchies. We talk about the importance of having dignity and self-respect. And I mention a wonderful book called The Meritocracy Trap by Daniel Merkovitz. He is a prestigious economist and professor at Yale University. And in this book, he demonstrates some of the downsides of our meritocratic system, which we normally think of as a good thing. But it is a system which rewards hard work as well as luck. And the reality is it's creating a world of increasingly intense competition and elitist training that is often unnecessary and exclusionary. For example, the complexities of our legal codes and tax codes reward a high level of very specialized training, but having so many powerful and overpaid lawyers is driving our society to ever more litigation. And at the end of the day, it's a waste of human and financial resources that could be better put to actually building a happier world. So that's just one small example of many. Another example is the growth of hedge fund managers and other technocratic elites in the financial sector who create complex products such as the mortgage-backed securities, which led to the 2008 financial crisis and hurt millions of people around the globe. So I just wanted to give a short shout out to the Meritocracy Trap because it does come up in our conversation here. And I may do an upcoming episode delving more into this fascinating topic. And now, without further ado, I bring you Edward Galan. Edward, thanks for being back on the podcast. Round 2.
Thanks, Julian. Happy to be here, man.
Yeah. And we said we weren't going to do a big introduction, so people can listen to the first time you were on from a few weeks ago. I believe that was episode 50.
Wow, you've done that many, man.
I know, it's surprising.
It's an accomplishment to, stick with a project that long, man. So congratulations to you.
Thanks.
That's
it feels good. It feels good to have done that many, and it's like practicing the art of conversation. That's part of how I look at it.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. It is. And I'm sure you've talked to some, a lot of interesting people because of it, and are making all sorts of connections. So
yeah, exactly.
Great thing.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I think as many, bad things we hear about all the time, I think podcasts are a really positive thing that a lot of people are listening to, and more getting created all the time. Anyone can make one. It's a good side of the technology we have, I would say.
Absolutely.
So great. What's on your mind today?
Shoot. It's a lot of things we could talk about. Before this, you sent me a video or a podcast with Sam Harris,
right,
talking about I guess he was talking about the dangers of this current moment, and particularly when it comes to the protests and the riots and the Black Lives Matter movement, and how a lot of that can be used by someone like Trump in order to garner more support and even win this election.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. Maybe we could start there.
Totally.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it should be said that I really respect the people in the ideological dark web. Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein. I can't really say I respect that Ben Shapiro, but let's just say I respect people who are just speaking their mind. And I think sometimes, even though I don't agree with them totally, I think they're bringing up valid points, and they're bringing up things that they're enriching, I think, that the discussion flora and fauna out here. So
yeah, well, that's good. I appreciate that you appreciate them. And Sam Harris in particular has been a big influence on me. I don't by any means agree with everything he says, but it's a very powerful voice, and he's super logical and rational. And I think sometimes that's a little bit of his downfall, but it's also his superpower. And so when he's discussing things like, African Americans and police brutality and some of these issues, like, he's so logical about it. I think he misses some of the bigger symbolic impacts, some of the, he's aware of the history, obviously, but it's like he doesn't quite see the emotional level, the collective emotions around it. Yeah,
I agree. He has a lot of, he has, I think, though, what I see with Sam is he is open, and he does openly question himself, and he is open to continuing to dialogue about things. I do get that sense from him of like being genuinely open. And so I think I respect that. I respect that, even if I don't 100% agree with them. I think it's good to also recognize that at this point they have sort of built these guys have built an ecosystem, and they're profiting off of certain messages, right? I think you were saying that,
Right. I think right before we started recording, I was starting to talk about that, and it's like Sam Harris, Joe Rogan, a lot of these guys, I guess a lot of them are guys, a lot of these people in the intellectual dark web and in the podcast world are criticizing the social justice movement and how extreme it's gotten, and political correctness, and how it takes away people's ability to really express what they actually think. And there's these like thought police or language police on Twitter And there's so many examples of how ridiculous that gets. Like, it deserves, some of that criticism is deserved. Like, for example, there was what was it? A soccer player on the LA team. Did you hear about that? And his wife tweeted something like, "All lives matter." I don't know what it was exactly. And he got fired from the soccer team for what his wife tweeted. So it's just like little things like that. Like, maybe she was drunk, maybe she wasn't. Who knows? I don't know what someone really thinks in their heart when they tweet 3 words, or 2 words. 3 words.
Yeah, it's yeah, I really disagree with that aspect of this whole thing of trying to get people fired and stuff like that. And mostly I disagree with it because it's a it's like a blunt tool. It's an inaccurate, imprecise weapon that can easily come back to haunt the people that are using it now. Um, and I think as we go along further down this history timeline, you'll see, well, not history, because history, I guess, is in the past. The future timeline, you're going to see that, yeah, these things will be used against the radical left. And personally,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
going to be amused. I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to be amused by it because fucking told you.
That's a great point. And I haven't thought about that enough, that if you use these weapons, if one side uses a weapon, then the other side will eventually turn that weapon around. And
oh yeah.
well, just to finish my thought about the Sam Harris, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson in particular, like, they've gotten so famous, they actually make their living off of criticizing this the far left, the extremists, all that political correctness have gone too far, but they don't ever, I never hear them like really recognize how it's benefiting them personally in this weird way.
Right.
And that's like a hole I see in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the most egregious example in that group, well, besides somebody like, well, let's say like Jordan Peterson to me was like really bad at this because like he would on one video he'd talk about balance and this or that, but I really didn't hear balance from him at all. I feel like he was way he knew who his base was, and he knew
Yeah.
not to anger them and not to talk to them in a certain way, and he reserved all of his vitriol and all of his emotional energy towards the radical left, and yeah, and I just saw that as really disingenuous. You can be disingenuous by not only what you say, right, telling lies, but also what you admit. And a lot of what's happening right now is a lot of people, they'll talk about the rioting, this or that, but like, are you talking enough about how screwed up policing is in the United States?
Right.
And there, I don't see a balance with a lot of people.
Yeah.
For me, I try whatever space I'm in, I try to be that balance. So if I'm talking to a bunch of people who are kind of going overboard on the radical left is the problem, then you'll probably hear me kind of taking the other side. And the same thing with most of my friends. Like, I engage a lot of my friends on Facebook, and most of them are radical leftists. And so I'm not engaging with them from the point of view of like, I mean, I do post articles and things like that that are more aligned with my feelings and views about police brutality and all that. But I try to engage with them more from the point of view of like, well, somebody who is maybe on the fence, somebody who's questioning these things, what would they say? How do you defend this thing that I think is problematic? That's my approach. And I've gotten major shit for it.
Interesting.
I recently got accused of aiding and supporting white supremacists.
Oh, really? Wait, I want to hear that story.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I don't even honestly, I don't even want to get into it, man. It's just it's so lame. It's so lame. It's just people.
Is this on Facebook or something?
Yeah, on Facebook. I think people just get really emotional at times. They maybe misread something, and unfortunately, like once a person kind of like has it against you, once they start seeing you as like an enemy, it's very easy for them to just continue to misinterpret everything that you say, and before you know it, you just broken that relationship.
Right.
Um,
Is this
and
people that you knew personally or just people you knew online?
people I met online,
Okay. Because I think that makes a big difference.
It does, it does. And another thing that makes a difference is um, whether you keep it all through written word, like writing texts and messages, or if you have a phone call. I find that people are much more agreeable when they're able to hear your voice, and they can hear that you don't um, when you say how you when you express yourself, how you express yourself, you're not trying to be a dick. um,
Right. That's another great point. Like just reading the text message or the post online without any emotion, without any the context, without it's like a personal connection. I mean,
yeah,
and I think this study has been kind of debunked, but there was this psychological study in the 1960s that I think the study claimed 98% or something of communication is nonverbal. And that 98%, maybe that's an exaggeration, but it's something like, a huge amount of our communication actually does happen on the nonverbal level. And
yeah.
I think that's part of why, to go back to podcasting, and I think that's part of what the popularity here is. Like, we're talking to each other, there's a back and forth, you can hear the inflections in our voice. It makes a big difference.
It does, it really does.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, for all your viewers, I would say if you're having issues with somebody in your world, um, I would encourage you to try to have your interactions with that person um, be over the phone or video chat or in person if possible, um,
Yeah.
and try to just limit the text and yeah, just the texting. It's going to, the more contentious the conversation and the topic, the more room for misinterpretation there's going to be.
Right.
So,
Well, and I mean, you as, a black person, like to be called aiding white supremacy, that's got to carry that much more of a kick to it, or maybe not for you. I don't know, but
I
it's
mean, to be honest, it's so ridiculous. I have a hard time. I have a hard time even being offended by it. To be honest, it's just like if
okay.
somebody called me like a Martian or something. It's like
That's a good attitude.
I
So
don't.
yeah, you just see through it. You don't take it too seriously.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
really bothers me.
is that this is an example of kind of online bullying or being called something online because they didn't like what you were saying. They didn't like whatever idea you were expressing. I
Yeah,
mean, how is that like? How do you understand this? Like, because that's a perfect example of this dynamic where people are so quick to jump to use a word like racist or white supremacist. They miss the vast. There's so much gray area. There's so much gradation. There's so many different viewpoints, and just slap those labels on. My big fear. One of my big fears with the social media dynamics and our political discourse right now is that these words are going to lose all meaning. And then
yeah,
real white supremacists, real Nazis, real racists are going to be indistinguishable from someone who's just a little bit conservative. And that's a disaster.
yeah. That's a concern for me too. It's I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know what to say other than that. It's a concern, man. These people, they're overusing these words way too much, way
Yeah.
too much. You have
It's a
to
way,
you
it's a
have to
way
be
of
able to draw
controlling.
distinction.
Yeah. Like a way of controlling people, shutting people down. I mean, I haven't been called that publicly online. I mean, I'm thankful for that, but I guess I should kind of prepare myself, like putting out a podcast like this. It kind of opens up that door, and maybe someone won't like something I say and they'll throw that at me. And it's hard. That's really hard to hear because that's not what I believe in. It's not how I want to be seen. And
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I think white folks, in particular, need to. I think people in general need to know where they're at, and be confident in where their heart is at. And if you're not something, can't really can't let those words affect you, and you can't let the fear of being called stuff stop you from expressing your opinion. and you can be humble about it. I think that that's the big
Mm.
thing I would say that, and often why white folks get in trouble with a lot of these conversations is that there isn't enough humility. There isn't enough of
Mm.
just coming at a conversation with from a place of like, well, look, like this is what I know. I don't I don't pretend to know everything because this is not my experience,
Mm.
but this is my like little humble opinion. I feel like unfortunately some people just come at topics like way too authoritatively, and like they come off as know-it-alls. Um, they take up too much space,
Mm.
meaning they just want to hear themselves talk, and they're not trying to make space to also listen what the other person has to say. I find those are often, if I had to like point out to common problems among white folks in dialogue, I would say those are some of the more common ones. Um,
Yeah, no,
but
I really appreciate that message. I think it's powerful to hear that from you in particular. To not be afraid. I think what we like having honest, real dialogue is so important. And if you're holding back or trying to say the right thing all the time, you're not being authentic, and you don't get a chance to really connect on a deeper level.
yeah, you're not, you know, and and this is the thing that a lot of my friends who are into social justice work and are white, they tend to be very agreeable people.
Mm.
They tend to be people very low when it comes to social dominance. Do you know what that? You know what that? Have you heard of like social dominance?
Yeah, that's so interesting that you're naming that. I mean, I've observed that, but I don't know if I've ever talked about it in those words. But like that, when are you kind of referring to like when we're in a group of people, we kind of organize ourselves? Some people talk more or are bigger, and some people kind of hold back, or there's kind of
Yeah,
a dominant voice. Yeah.
yeah. Social dominance orientation refers to how how comfortable a person is with hierarchy, essentially,
Mm.
and how likely they are to sort of categorize people who they encounter and put them in some sort of hierarchy, and how likely they are also to believe that, let's say, people higher on the hierarchy deserve to be treated better than people lower on the hierarchy.
Mm.
um, so shouldn't come as a surprise, there's a correlation between being conservative, especially the type of people that would support Donald Trump, um, who tend to be more kind of towards authoritarian, I would say.
Hmm.
There's a correlation between social dominance orientation being high and also conservatism, right?
Interesting. Right.
And the inverse for being liberal.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
and there's different ways you can talk about it. Like I've heard what I think is pretty much the same thing you're saying talked about by Ken Wilber. He's a philosopher and integral theorist,
yeah,
and he talks about the we don't have to get into it too much here, but like that the green meme that like people are like there's the spiral dynamics of like levels of development, and when people are on the green level, which is a high level of development and moral development and political development, but you're very agreeable and you hate hierarchy, so you try to make everyone equal. The problem with it is it's very hard to get anything done if you have a group of people where
yeah,
no one's taking leadership.
yeah. That's one problem.
It's one problem.
The other thing is, just being not. I think that there's a problem on both ends of the whole acknowledging that. I think Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this, like the competency hierarchy, and how,
Right.
for the most part, most people that make it up to on the top of the hierarchy have displayed some level of competency, meaning like to some degree the world is sort of meritocratic. um I think that you can make a case for that, as well as making a case for meritocracy kind of not being meritocracy at all, and just there being corruption and kind of a rigged system.
Totally. Yeah, they're both. There's truth to both.
There really is, and I think if you lean too hard on either one of those ends, you're in trouble. You're gonna come to
Yeah.
a lot of bad conclusions.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating question too. I had a friend who said that people who have put a lot of effort into their life and into what they're doing and had some success are more likely to, then you feel like you've earned it. And then the shadow side of that is like looking down on people or seeing other people as lazy who haven't had the same success as you've had. It can become
Yeah,
it can become a very negative internal attitude where you have aggression towards yourself to try to always make yourself better than how you are. Then you look
yeah,
down on
yeah,
other people, and it's very competitive and very individualistic. And I think
yeah.
that really needs to be find a balance with that, with compassion, with caring about others. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really important dynamic to talk about. Um, Unfortunately, I think a lot of people who make it, one, are don't acknowledge all of the privileges that often went into helping them make it, all the support that they had, starting from childbirth on,
right.
and I think that they're not really in tune with how bad some people really have it. Um, like start, because all of this starts like in the womb, man.
Mm,
In the womb, like literally coming from like if you come from it could be a somewhat dysfunctional home, but if you have both of your parents and you have stability there, you're not worried about food. Your parents actually like worry about your education and can help you, are educated themselves, can
mm,
help you with your homework.
hmm.
Um, if your parents like are able to, buy actually own their home, live out, in a quiet area, away from pollution, away from a lot of noise. I mean, so many things kind of like that compound over time. And those privileges allow give people the safety and the space to then have their order higher level functioning happens only when you are in a safe environment and you have your basic needs met. That's a huge part of privilege. If you don't, if you're worried about money constantly, and if you have just worried about your safety in your neighborhood and things like that, those type of things um, almost like keep you in your I don't even know. I don't know that I don't want to like the part of your brain that is like in the
Right.
fight or flight, the
You're right.
reptile or mammalian brain.
Yeah, the amygdala and all that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great
And
point.
yeah, it's really that I think it's really that simple. I experienced it myself actually recently. I had been telling this story because it was so profound to me, right?
Mm,
Um, I had an experience where I looked at my bank account and I saw like, oh wow, like there's actually like this is like a good amount of money saved up. And
mm,
I just was overcome with a feeling of like I made it. I made it to a level of security that I haven't experienced in like years,
yeah.
uh, and it immediately I swear to God, like the next thought was I'm gonna invest some of this money,
Nice.
and that is and I mean that sounds obvious, but like that is evidence that I needed that security because I've been thinking about investing for a long time actually, but I didn't feel secure enough
Mm.
in what I had to actually do it. And in this case, I saw my bank account. I felt
Mm.
this is okay. This is like a good amount of money. I can now feel safe enough to start thinking about my future and having a future orientation as opposed to like just survival. And to me, that was profound. As
Yeah, that's
someone
a
who
powerful story.
I haven't grown, someone who didn't grow up with a lot of financial support. Um, yeah, an experience like that does make
Hmm.
a difference.
Yeah. Well, it's saying like it takes money to make money. Without that sense of trust and security, then you don't want to invest. And if you don't invest, then your money doesn't get bigger over time if you're able to do that. It
Exactly,
really
and
is. This whole concept of meritocracy is very flawed. And there's a great book. I forget the guy's name, but an economist came out with a book criticizing it. But like basically, I mean, part of what he was saying is like we've just created this hyper competitive system. It does reward effort. So you basically need privilege, you need the right schools, the right training, the right education, all the support, all the stuff you just talked about, and then you need to work really hard, and then you will most likely will be successful. But it's created a tremendous amount of stress and uncertainty and like this constant struggle for survival that's really more
right.
than we need. We don't really we have so many resources and technology now. People used to imagine the future and like robots would be doing all our work for us. And the reality is we're working more now than we were 100 years ago. It's almost it's insane, I think. So
Really, it said we're working more now than 100 years ago.
I forget the numbers exactly, but like the average person, like especially if you look at like entrepreneurs and businessmen, like they're putting in 60, 70 hours a week.
That's true. Yeah.
Um, it's just yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really unhealthy balance. I mean, and that's the thing, like that is part because I bet you a lot of these CEOs and hyper successful people. I don't know. Do you listen to Gary Vee?
Uh,
Okay, he's like entrepreneur and motivational speaker.
hmm,
And his whole thing is like having a hustle mentality, and you work, work, work,
hmm.
work, work 80-hour weeks or whatever, um, while you're young, so that you can retire early, and like it's that whole mentality. And like I don't think everybody's like really built like that. Other people
Hmm.
really prioritize their quality of life and just not willing to go there. I think that we should respect that. I mean, really, the best the best that we can do, the best that I've seen that organized society can do, is just to ensure people have the basics, and from there, you're still going to have the meritocracy. You're still going to have some people being a lot more successful than others, but you're not going to, I think, experience as much of the extremes that we
Right.
see in the country. And I think that's really when you start to see the extremes, is when you kind of, okay, society is in trouble. Um,
Yeah, I like that. I think so. I just looked up the book I'm referring to. It's called The Meritocracy Trap. I'll put a link to it by Daniel Merkovitz. I like what you're suggesting, that we can create a society where the extremes are lessened. At the bottom end of the extreme, we have basic things like healthcare, basic education, basic food, basic housing for people. And then at the upper end, we have a tax system that, you can earn a lot of money, you can work hard and get more money than other people, but it's not such an extreme inequality in wealth where just because you came out on top of Amazon, you get to have, more money than, whatever it is, $100 billion. I mean, when we look at a lot of these really rich people, like Jeff Bezos with Amazon, he created a platform for other people to sell stuff on. So he's like taking a tax off of what other people are doing now. And the internet is structured in such a way where these systems would have developed anyway. Like we would have had a Facebook, we would have had an marketplace, and he's able to come out on top right now. But it's I don't there's no logic behind saying he deserves the level of success, him personally,
right,
versus all the other
right.
people in the world. Yeah, he deserves some credit for sure, but there's a tremendous amount of luck there, for sure.
luck, and yeah, he's using, he's profiting off of disproportionately from other people's labor, and that's kind of a lot of systems under capitalism are kind of like that. Under any system, really, like humans are. That's the thing. I'm not a big pusher of socialism or communism. Really, what we have to work on, I think, is on ourselves, is on becoming better, more moral humans. I think.
Yeah,
Um, like, I think that a movement that would excite me and make me say, okay, I support this, would be some kind of movement that centralizes sort of like human development, like the
mm,
development of the person, um, into being just more compassionate, more understanding, all those functions that come in that manifest in the prefrontal cortex, like developing those,
absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
that that interests me, but you can get into the kind of the ugly side of human nature with pretty much any of these political systems that sort of are more central about, like, economics is more central, not so much morality and values. I really feel like we could solve so much if we just incentivize care and compassion in the economy. Like, literally, almost all of our problems we would maybe have different new problems, but we would solve a lot of the problems that we have now. Um, and maybe changing the topic over to, for instance, defunding the police, which I think a lot of people are well intentioned, right, in saying, yeah, like, we want to, like, take away funds from the police, and we want to give those same funds to social workers, to
Mm,
medical staff, to after school
hmm.
programs, et cetera, et cetera. That is a really, I think actually I support that for the most part. Um, however, yeah, I think part of the reason that people are having a problem with the whole defund the police movement, and the people who just want to abolish police, which
Mm.
is an idea I don't agree with, um, is because I think people sense that this is sort of coming from, like, a punitive place. This is like it's the same kind of sentiment as, like, when Trump is like, yeah, like, California, the governor's not doing what I want, so I think we're just going to take away funds from the whole state of California. It's
Mm.
coming from this, like, punitive place of, like, you're
Interesting.
not doing what I want, so therefore I'm going to hurt you. And I think they're right to sense that, like, it is coming from a punitive place. And I
Mm.
don't think most people are even tuned into that. They're not even thinking about that. They're just thinking about the rightness or wrongness of their opinion, and they're not thinking about the intentionality behind it and the impacts. Like, if I like, if I tell a child, you know, go to your room, you know, and I say it just like that, that's very different than, like, I say, calmly say, like, hey, listen, I want you to go to your room. You need to think about what you just did,
Mm.
something like that. Like, there's, like, energetic differences to how we approach this that I think make all the difference, really. And unfortunately, a lot of people are going to listen to this and say, "Oh, that's respectability politics." So you're saying that we're going to solve everything by being nicer. And I mean, to some extent, yeah, I am. I'm saying that if
You said
you
respectability politics. What is that?
respectability politics, it's basically um, the politics of essentially telling people, be nicer, dress better,
Okay.
in order to be respectable, and then not like be messed with by the cops or not be discriminated as much against.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think there's truth to it. You can hate on it all you want. I think people, I think if you do kind of behave in a certain way, you do avoid a lot of problems. But yeah, it's not the whole solution.
Right.
So
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I lost my train of thought. But like, I think that basically we need to treating each other well, especially when what you're asking is to be treated well, is pretty important.
Yeah.
Like I can't just like, if what I want you to do is respect me as a individual, treat me as an individual, and give me the same rights as anybody else, but then I have this ideology of like, all white people are racist and all white people, like um like I'm not treating you as an individual, but I'm demanding that I'm treated as an individual. Does that make sense? There's like a
Yeah, that's a good
contradiction
point.
there
Yeah.
that it's constantly showing itself in these social justice movements. People are like
Yeah.
contradicting themselves all the time in what they're asking for, but like what are you showing? And the energy that you give out is what people are often going to reciprocate. Some people are going to be understanding. Again, some white people and some people in general are just more agreeable. And an agreeable person will, even if you come at them in a mean way, they're going to try to find the good in you. They're going
Right.
to want to, they're going to look past the insult that you just hurled at them. And sometimes, yeah, you do need that. That's a great quality to have. But I don't think that the opposite is being disagreeable is actually that bad of a quality sometimes, because disagreeable people are very tuned into the reality of intentionality, and they're very tuned into when somebody is not treating them with respect, somebody's not treating them with dignity, and they're
Right.
going to let you know, and they're going to get angry, and they're going to show an emotional response. And that's important, because that's actually how people keep their dignity, is by being disagreeable. That's why we're encouraging these fucking protests to happen, right? We
Right.
want people to be disagreeable in the face of indignities.
Right.
And so that's going back to what I was saying earlier. I think white people, if you are in a conversation and you start to feel like you're not being treated fairly, like it's okay to say, I don't agree with this. I don't like how I'm being treated. And
Right.
to demand that you are treated well.
And that's
Because
actually respecting the other person more too, because it's a kind of false kindness to let someone else disrespect you or do something unethical or illegal or whatever it is, because you're enabling behavior that's eventually going to hurt them and hurt other people. And it's not really, that's not really a compassionate act either. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I think it's super important. I think you just named a lot of really important points. And some of the contradictions or hypocrisies in some of the social justice stuff, where I think you just said it really well. Like we want to look at everyone as individuals, and yet we're making claims like all white people are racist. And then if you disagree with that, then that's just proof of how racist you are. Right. Yeah. That's not a conversation. That's a label that's being slapped on you. And it's
pretty much.
What do you think about this idea of white fragility?
White fragility. All right. So first, I'll give it. First, I'm gonna prop it up and give it some credibility. I think if you do grow up with privilege, then even like the slightest indignity and lack of privilege can seem like a big deal. And I think some people really do get used to getting their way all the time. and they're nice because they get their way most of the time. And as soon as they don't get their way, then you see just how fragile and mean they can be.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
there's another term that's often used, which is white tears.
Oh, yeah.
And that one also is I'll also say something to give it some credence first.
Mm.
I've definitely seen people. I mean, we saw that video right before the George Floyd thing. That woman who called the cops on the bird watching, on the black man bird
Oh,
watching,
yeah. Right.
and was crying and saying, "Oh my
Bro,
God,
yeah.
this black man here." Yeah,
Well, so
that's why.
just a quick side note, and I like what you're saying, but like that guy, that man who she called the police on, interestingly enough, from what I read, like he didn't want her to be arrested for that. Remember that? Like
Yeah, that
he,
was recent. Uh-huh.
I imagine he would agree with a lot of what you're expressing here. I could be wrong
Maybe.
about that, but it seemed
Yeah.
like he was saying like not to, like when you at the beginning of our conversation you said don't like you're against people just getting fired because it's this blunt instrument. I think he said something kind of in that vein.
Oh, okay. I didn't listen. I haven't heard him speak really on the issue,
Well,
but it sounds
he
like it's
refused to
maybe
cooperate with the investigation for one reason or another.
he's actually maybe more generous than I would have been, to be honest, because I thought that was a really egregious uh, thing that she did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Well, but the fact that it became so famous and that like we're talking about now is to me a sign of progress. Like we, generally speaking, everyone was like, "Oh, that's fucked up. This person is in the wrong. She shouldn't have called the
yeah,
police." So
no, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean that what that woman did is an example of white tears.
right. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Um, you know, white, particularly white women, expressing distress and saying, making false claims and things like that has taken the lives of a lot of people. Um, so
Yeah, it's a serious
yeah,
thing. It's actually a big deal. I appreciate you
yeah.
saying that. Yeah.
So all right. So now let me say why things I don't like about white fragility. Um, I think you never. Often, what I kind of hear with the whole white fragility thing is like basically like it's used against anytime a white person basically like says, yeah, I don't like this, I don't agree with this, or stuff like that. It's used as sort of, again, like a blunt weapon to
Mm.
kind of say, yeah, like you're basically like not willing to listen, or you're not willing to conform to what we say, so therefore you're just fragile
Mm.
and you're privileged. And so it's a way to not take people serious,
Hmm.
and to almost make like their emotional responses uh, evidence that they are fragile, instead of like that they're feeling, and that they, yeah, that they're actually like feel strongly and passionately about something, which I think is valid. The whole white
Yeah.
tears thing I've seen used. I mean, I've seen really bad examples of the white tears thing used against white people. For instance, like basically, I've seen conversations that are hard, really hard and contentious,
Mm.
and a white person, usually a white woman, is like really, they're not used to maybe having conversations that are this intense. They're not used to kind of just
Mm.
being on defensive like this, and they get emotional. They get, they're crying and they're getting emotional. And some people are just emotional, man.
Mm.
And then I've had people kind of see that and view that as like a negative thing, like the fact that they're getting emotional is an example of how fragile they are, and how um and maybe even seen as manipulative, like they're trying to take attention away from maybe the tough issue that was being talked about and put attention on feeling sorry for them. And that's not to say, I mean, that dynamic could be happening. That could be happening.
Mm.
But to automatically like go there, and again, I've seen examples of this being used, and it's terrible, man. You don't, yeah, like
Yeah.
you want people. I mean, people are gonna get emotional, and that's a good thing. That's beautiful sometimes. Like
Right. You don't want to
people are feeling.
shame someone for their feelings, and it's kind of
Yeah,
like the dynamic you're describing just makes me think like damned if you do, damned if you don't. No matter what you do or don't do, it's wrong. It's more proof of your racism or privilege, and that kind of attitude I think isn't helpful. Like shaming people, making people feel guilty. Maybe if there's a reason for that, okay, but like generally speaking, that's not part of like a real genuine healing process of like understanding each other, seeing each other as fellow humans, and like really seeing where you're coming from. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to be in a group like that, and if someone starts crying and someone else says white tears, and then you like pause and like really explore, like, are you crying for attention, and like listen to them and see, because I think people can tell what's true and not true if you give it a chance.
yeah, and it wasn't. It's never been like something that somebody said like at that moment, like somebody's crying and they're like, oh, those are white tears. Like I haven't seen it. I'm sure that's happened, but I didn't witness that. But it's something that people would like maybe comment afterwards and say like, oh, like, you know, like I didn't like how so and so was like crying and making it all about her. Like I'm
Mm.
like, well, why, they had an emotional response, like they were crying, like they were, if when I get really angry, like if I get angry enough, I'm like literally at the point of tears.
Mm.
Um, when I feel things that really powerful in a really powerful way, like yeah, you cry, um, and that shouldn't be automatically be seen as like somebody trying to manipulate you or make it about them. They're just having their emotional experience. Like
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, there's a lot there. So it's something that you have to sort of analyze and look at case by case.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me to think about like that there's this connection or parallel between some of the social justice stuff, maybe the more extreme stuff, and kind of Christian religion, where like the idea of original sin, like that, like if you tell everyone like if you're white, you're racist, and nothing you can do or say can get rid of this unconscious bias you carry. I mean, that's basically the message, as I understand it, of the book White Fragility. Um, it kind of leaves you in this hopeless place, and it's also disempowering, where like you don't know your own mind. Like if you don't, like someone else is telling you what's true for you. And
Yeah,
I think there can be some truth to unconscious bias. I'm not totally dismissing that. I think there's some truth to all these concepts, or a lot of them. But
yeah,
if we want to create a better society, is it really worth our time and energy to try to exercise these unseen demons that no one is saying or acting on, versus like actual acts of racism that we can document and then address?
yeah, yeah. There's things. I was actually kind of a similar discussion yesterday, but it was concerning conspiracy theories. And I think that there's things that are true, um, that are sort of like not worth pursuing,
Mm.
and not worth like thinking too
Mm.
much about, because there's more real and, let's just say, more tangible things like right in front of you that you can obviously do something about, that just deserve more of your attention than, I don't know, some like satanic ring of pedophiles that's abducting children and like sucking the adrenal
Right. I've heard that one too.
from their
And it
skull.
may or may not be true, or it's just a rabbit hole.
It's pointless. It's pointless to focus so much energy, mind energy on something like that when you have real injustice that you can do something about right in front of you. Like, deal with that first. It's a way of it's almost like bypassing in a way. And I think that I feel similarly about this whole thing of like, why, like, okay, maybe everybody has like implicit bias and racist attitudes. Why even focus? If everybody has it, it's not really, I don't know, it's just like doesn't merit that much to be talking about it in this way. It's like,
well, it's maybe the way forward is to focus on it in a more constructive way. Like, like I remember when I was learning how to drive a car, and one of the things I got taught was like, don't look where you don't want to go. Like if you start staring at a wall, there's a good chance you'll drive into the wall. So like look on the road where you want to drive to. And I think that applies to this. Like as a society, we want to move to a post-racist world, a world where racism is very rare, where it doesn't exist that much, where it's not in the government, it's not in the police. How can we imagine that and move towards that rather than obsess over
that's a great
all the little things? Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah. Right. Something you said earlier when we were talking made me think of this. It's a strategy. It's something I use pretty often. So I'm often crossing the street. I'm on my bike or walking. And I have a habit of whoever it is, if they stop for me, I don't really look at them. I sort of look in their direction. I kind of make sure that they're looking at me as well. And I just sort of like wave and say, thanks for letting me pass by. I don't look too hard. And I do that for a reason. I'm only concerned with the fact that they let me go by. I'm sure that if I actually looked at some people, I would actually see a lot of people who are upset. They're like, oh, this dude just like crossed the street without, whatever. And they like stop for me, but they're like actually upset at me. They could be like flipping me off. And like, they could even, be mouthing something off. I don't even want to see it.
Yeah, that's a good attitude.
This is not always, I'm sure this is not always the best attitude to have towards everything. But generally, I'm like, I can't think of many good interactions, many good things that are going to happen from me knowing that somebody was flipping me off or saying something bad or just having a scowl on their face. It's not going to help my day at all. All I care about is that they stopped and let me cross. That's it. I have my objective. I'm following my objective. And I think that's really close to what you're saying,
Yeah.
Focus on what you need to do to get across the street.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to another thing you were talking about with that slogan of defund the police. It's like when the protests started after George Floyd, like I was inspired. I think, and I hope that real reform will happen. I think it is happening to some degree. But I've come to the conclusion that the slogan defund the police is a terrible slogan. Like it's just the worst slogan that this protest, this is the biggest protest since the civil rights movement. And I feel like it was this amazing moment. And I know they're still going on in a few places like Portland, but for the most part, the protests have died down. It's an amazing moment of people showing up, coming together, standing up for something. And I feel like there was a lack of leadership and a lack of messaging. And I feel sad about that.
Really, really, really sad what's happening in terms of messaging.
Yeah.
The left has been for a long time now horrible. I can't say this enough. Horrible when it comes to messaging and framing issues in the correct way. Just pathetic. I can't, just bad. And I can't say enough bad things about this area. Like it's just
it's so bad. It's almost like what to even say about it. I mean, to me, like, we have Trump because the left is so bad in this country. Like, if it's just terrible. The Democratic Party is just terrible.
Because the system is so bad
Yeah,
and
this.
has been bad for so long.
Yeah,
And the left, yeah, it's just has been weak. It's been weak. It hasn't counteracted these forces how it should, and a lot of it is because it's focusing on the wrong things. But focusing on
mm.
how powerful would it have been if instead of making this about race, if, for instance, they had made this just about police brutality, which white people in this country also are brutalized by police
Yeah,
at a very high rate compared to most other, first world countries. Like,
yeah. I've heard
really,
some crazy
it's a
statistics
very
about that. Yeah,
it's really bad for everybody. It's really, really bad. The only group that is like that's really not like harassed that much by police, it seems, that are Asians.
oh, interesting.
But but other than that, man, it's a nationwide problem, and I feel like this
Yeah,
movement would
yeah,
have been just so much more powerful. But unfortunately, and people want to stick with the whole Black Lives Matters and All Lives Matters makes you a racist. Okay, I mean, they picked this road. I think it's not the best road, but whatever. Um,
I agree. I agree
I
completely. It's sad to think about.
Yeah, and the other one is what if people had made this about kind of not just about police brutality, but about economic justice,
Yeah,
especially at a time right now where, like, man, people are about to get uh, thrown out in the streets. They can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage, and the economy is so bad. This president is handling this so awfully, and this totally could have been made into a huge movement that centered. Maybe it could have been the center is still police brutality and some of the systemic racism things, but the sort of like the offshoots and a lot of the movement and the actions were also centered around this economic problem that we're all facing right now.
yeah,
So if this if people in the leadership and people had this like sort of this vision of what could be, these movements could be a lot more powerful.
absolutely.
But
Well, that's a
it's a
great
big
point.
missed opportunity, and I don't think it's too late. And I'm trying to stoke up the fires of people who do want to focus a little bit more on the economics, because you saw, like, I mean, even people were like talking more seriously about giving people money, reparations. People were talking
Yeah,
more seriously about just universal basic income. People were talking more seriously about forgiving student debt. Those are the conversations that I think will bring more energy and more people to the table that will have a stake in, well, maybe not so much the reparations, but the other ones will bring a lot more stakeholders to the table. And I
yeah,
think that's
like,
what we want.
right.
Um, so along with supporting Black people and yeah, making it. I mean, again, I don't disagree with saying Black Lives Matters. I totally get it and support it. Um, I just do think that, like I said, it's just we are in this moment where so many people are suffering, and I do feel like often, and this might be controversial to say,
Hmm.
but I do feel often that in the social justice world and identity politics world, it's sort of like feel sorry for us, feel bad for us, but we don't feel nothing for you. We don't give a
Hmm.
shit about your feelings. We don't give a shit if you this or
Hmm.
that. And when you give off that kind of energy, yeah, a lot of people are not going to care.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Yeah, you just said a whole lot again. I mean, it made me think about if this movement was about how we can come together as communities and improve our communities. How, because like one good thing that I've heard talked about here is like, let's have more social workers, let's have more therapists go work with homeless people, for example, go work with drug addicts rather than a police officer with a gun who is overworked and underslept and is about to pull it out on someone, or is just some asshole looking for an excuse to fight. Like, let's have different groups of trained people to respond to different needs. I think that's a great idea, but the slogan defund the police doesn't capture that. It doesn't communicate that. I wonder if part of what happened with this movement or is happening is like this lack of leadership. Um, like there's not a Black Lives Matter leader like we had MLK, and maybe we need more of that. We need a platform, or we need
Yeah.
but the other thing you said that I'll just throw in here towards the end is like, I've gotten in some arguments with people about this all lives matter being racist, and I have a problem with that because I think racism is wrong. I don't agree with it. I want to speak out against it, and I think all lives matter is like a literally true statement. It's something I actually believe in. And so if you take something that's like a true statement and you make it a proof of your racism, and I guess it can be used with different intentions and in different ways, but it's just an example
Yeah.
of like this language game that's really frustrating.
Yeah, it's a whole language game. It's just stupid. Honestly, I don't even. That's why I barely even engage with it, to be honest.
Mm.
And it's, I mean, it's fun. Like during 4th of July, I posted a meme that said like all countries matter, you know, things like that. It is funny to kind of make fun of right wing hypocrisy,
Right.
which there's a lot of. Because a lot of the people that do say all lives matters, they don't really mean it. They don't really
Right.
understand yet why people are saying Black Lives Matters. So
Right.
I think, yeah, but at the same time, to get into an argument and say you're automatically racist if you even say it, and to try to fire people for saying it, it's just dumb. It's just dumb. I don't know. I just can't. I don't even engage with that stuff, man.
Yeah.
It's um
One of the biggest, just real quick, Facebook kind of shitstorms I ever saw was this guy who posted about all lives matter, but he made this long post about veganism and how we shouldn't be hurting all these animals. And man, people, must have been 300 comments, and people banning him and so angry. And so anyway.
yeah. Yeah. So I think we're a long way from actually living all lives matter, you know.
Right,
It's
that's a good point. Like, do you really believe that, or is that what you really mean to say? What do you mean by that? It actually takes a long discussion to understand where someone's really coming from. It's not a 3-word slogan that tells you something.
yeah. And I think we're radicalizing people unnecessarily to kind of be contrarians and to be kind of,
Hmm.
yeah, just people are really solidifying and taking sides and joining one camp or another because we're not treating each other with respect and paying attention to nuance and trying to really get into the intentionality of things. And it's unfortunate, man. It's
Hmm.
unfortunate that it's getting,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspectives again.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you for having me, and thank you for creating this podcast. I mean, just to end, I do feel somewhat optimistic about what's possible. I think we can. I'm seeing more and more people kind of making calling out not only the messed up things on the right, but also some of the messed up things on the left, and
Hmm.
that's heartening. I'm glad that more and more people are willing to have this discussion. So it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're moving in a good direction overall, despite all the chaos. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
disagree with Sam. I mean, I don't know that podcast. Sam, he sounded like he sounded a bit like an alarmist to me. Uh,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I get
Apocalyptic.
it. Yeah, I get it. I'm concerned like he is. I just, anyways, we'll leave that for another discussion.
Yeah. I guess time will tell.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, man.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening. If you have found this podcast valuable, there are many ways in which you can support it. You can share it with friends and on your social media. You can leave us a review on your favorite podcast listening app. And you can visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/astateofmind. For show notes and more information unique to each episode, visit astateofmindplay.com. And to learn more about my work as a therapist, meditation teacher, and coach, visit julianocean.us. And please don't hesitate to send me a message or email and let me know what you think and contribute to our conversation. Thank you so much for your support. It is listeners like you that make all this so very much worthwhile.